Good afternoon. My name is Kareem Shishakli at IC Systems. Today I am pleased to introduce Ken Thompson, who will be talking about his leadership training offerings that are available through businesssimulations.com.
Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Good morning for some people, maybe. I'm Ken Thompson. I'm ringing in from Belfast, so hopefully you can take some time to tune into my accent. People from Ireland tend to talk quite fast. I don't know if you heard the story about the short-sighted javelin thrower at the last Olympics. He didn't break many records, but he kept the crowd alert. So I'm going to go quite fast here, cover a lot of ground, but hopefully you will get something out of it. So as Kareem kindly said, I'm CEO and founder of Business Simulations Limited. We've been a long-term partner of IC Systems, and by that I really mean long-term. We've probably been writing simulations in the early forms of, I think, probably for about 30 years, so possibly even longer. So it's a very long and fruitful collaboration. I'm going to first of all do a little bit of brief overview of the different types of business simulation you can have. Going to talk a little bit about the rationale and benefits of business simulation. Very short. I'll be at a follow-up afterwards. If people want more detailed references, we can send those out. But the hub of what I'm going to do now on this session is 2 live business simulation demos where you can actually see what a real live business simulation looks like. One simulation all about business acumen, running an enterprise. The other one managing people in terms of high-performing teams and change management. We'll probably stop for a few questions maybe before we go into the live demos. I'm sure there'll be questions after the live demos as well. And then if we have time, I'm going to close out with 4 critical success factors for effective simulation-based learning, because it's not quite as easy as some people might make out. And then we should have some time for additional questions and answers. So that's the plan. So let's look at the types of business simulation first. Business simulations basically should address the practical challenges which leaders face. And we've done quite a lot of research on what are the challenges everybody faces when they're in leadership. And we think there's about 7. I'm sure there's more, but the 7 key ones. First one is you've got to deploy scarce management resources. Do you employ them there, or do you employ them here? There's all sorts of paradoxes there. Optimum deployment of resources. Secondly, leaders have to have skillful conversations with customers, with suppliers, with stakeholders, with members of staff. Thirdly, leaders have to deliver major projects. It's not enough to be great at strategy and to look after people if you can't actually deliver. These days, more and more, we find ourselves as leaders in the mode of having to recover from a crisis, or as it's now popularly called, an urgent situation. Leaders also need to succeed in competition. We're not in the markets by ourselves. Sometimes within our businesses, there will be competition as well. And sometimes it will be hard to get the right balance between competition and collaboration. A classic one for leaders is resolving dilemmas. You'd like to do A and you'd like to do B, but you don't have the resources to do both. A dilemma is a values conflict. I always say to people, I have a dilemma. I love chocolate, but I want a 6-pack stomach. It's not always possible to have those 2 things at the same time. And finally, almost the biggest role for a leader is to influence and convince. So our business simulations have grown up practically out of bespoke projects, which we've then generalized, and they all address typically one of these situations as the core topic. So a bit more about simulations. Some simulations are computer-based, as ours are. Some are board games, which can be absolutely brilliant. The tactile nature can be very powerful, and paper scenarios can be very, very good as well. Board games and paper scenarios are a bit more difficult in the virtual world, but some board games are really powerful learning tools. Simulations can be run in this mode, totally virtual, face-to-face, where everybody's in the same room, and a combination of virtual and face-to-face. And at the minute, with the COVID situation, for the last 9 months, every single simulation we've run has been virtual, with all participants generally working from home. Now, you can play a simulation as a team, or you can play a simulation as an individual. Most of our simulations are played in teams because we believe the learning experience is richer if you have to debate your decisions with your colleagues. Simulations can be facilitated, or they can also be in what we call solo mode, where they're self-directed. And one of the sims I'll show you tonight can be run in solo mode. And solo mode tends to be more individual, whereas facilitated tends to be more teams. Simulations can be intensive. They're played over short periods, all in one day, but more often we're seeing now they're played over extended periods. One round this week, one round next week, one round the week after. Very, very good for the learning, because the teams can get together in between and deepen the learning. Another characteristic of simulations is model-based versus interactive. In a model, everybody's playing their own simulation independently against the computer. So in a model-based simulation, everybody can grow market share, for example, at the same time. However, in an interactive simulation, you're all in the same sim. And in that example, then, as one team gains market share, they've gained it from another participant. But we use both types of simulation. They have their pros and cons, and I'm happy to go into those. Simulations can be standalone learning events, or they can be integrated into leadership development programs. We find quite often organizations put a simulation towards the end of a leadership development program, because it's a really nice way to end things off. People get to try out skills, and it brings it all together. Simulations can be off the shelf, they can be configured, or they can be customized. And there's 3 things you can really do in a simulation. You can run a business, you can manage people, or you can run a project. So that's a little bit of thinking about simulations. Now let's look a little bit at the rationale and benefits of simulations, and I'm going to go very quickly here. Why would you run a business simulation? Well, the first thing is it's a safe learning environment. Like, imagine if a new airline come out and they saved cost by not having the pilots do simulator training. Who would fly with them? So you need an environment where you can make mistakes and recover from them. Secondly, it's a very powerful way to learn. Experiential, experience something, then social, discuss it. That's one of the most powerful ways you can learn. And then these days, people like to be engaged through gamification. They like to participate. A fourth rationale for business simulations is if you've got an expert in a training course, it's very hard to deploy that scalably anywhere over the globe. Whereas a simulation, a lot of the knowledge is actually built into the simulation. So these are the rationales people tell us why they run simulations. In terms of the benefits, first of all, virtual experience. You make your mistakes in a safe environment without destroying a business or a relationship. Great environment for knowledge sharing, often not planned, but hearing what other people think is the right decision in a simulation can be really useful to you. I talked about simulations as vehicles for resolving dilemmas. You force a scarcity and people have to make trade-off decisions. Great for putting teams under pressure. How do teams react under pressure? So it can be a great team building thing, especially with newly formed teams. And the final thing is, we hear quite a lot, we try to pitch our simulations with what we call requisite difficulty. They're not too hard and they're not too easy either. We like people to go away thinking that was difficult, but I think I did well. And actually, it's a great confidence builder. If you do well in a difficult simulation, we've had very good feedback. It builds your confidence, builds your ambition. You feel up for new challenges. In terms of research, and I can send you a paper with all the references, then we're talking about game-based learning, gamification, the many benefits. People engage more, they learn and retain more. Business simulation is really dynamic, making case studies dynamic. Really good if you use real data, but does require skilled facilitation. And informal social learning accounts for 80 to 90% of all operationally relevant learning. When I first saw this statistic, it was a real shock to me that most of what we learn, useful information, is learned socially. That's either trying it out for ourselves or somebody else giving us feedback on the job as we go, or learning by making mistakes. So you can do all of these things really well in a simulation. Gartner say, I like their phrasing, it can accelerate the time to competency and the time to competence of learning. This is a nice slide here by Jessica Tribus from Carnegie Mellon University. Basically, there's 8 benefits from learning. Passive learning, you get the first 3: cost effectiveness, low physical risk liability, and standardization of assessments. With hands-on learning, you get lots of other things: high engagement, learning pace tailorable to the individual, immediate feedback, transferability of learning to the workplace, and engagement, and good game-based learning. You can get all 8 of these things. So these slides will be available afterwards, and more detailed information on the underpinning research. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump into 2 live simulation demos. The first one will be a business acumen simulation, and the second one will be a change management and a high-performing team simulation. So I don't know, Karim, whether we've any questions at this point or whether I can just keep going on.
I'd keep going right now.
Okay, so this first simulation is rather unimaginatively called XSIM. We've one called YSIM as well. So clearly our marketing department needs a bit of a shake-up. This is probably our most used business simulation. As an example, Boeing Aerospace have by themselves put 4,000 people through this simulation. All new starts at senior manager level and above at Boeing will play this simulation. So the topics are business acumen, strategy, team operations, stakeholder management, and crisis management. In the simulation, you're the new regional leadership team of Netbox, which is real-time entertainment. So think Amazon Prime or Netflix. You've got a CEO who role plays in the simulation and has a very demanding set of needs. And your team must manage Netbox for 12 months over 4 rounds, each representing a quarter. Typical timing is it's a 6-hour simulation. And normally we've 3 to 4 teams with 4 to 6 participants per team. Format-wise, it can be done on-site, fully virtual, or hybrid. And there's some really interesting decisions around pricing, product mix, operational priorities, org health, and management projects. Some special features, you get either a strategic opportunity or an operational crisis each quarter. You have to decide what to do with it. You are bombarded with news updates every 5 minutes to see how well you as a team are able to filter information. There are 10 major management dilemmas, and they're summarized in a book I've written. You get all 10 of the dilemmas in this one simulation. You can have a role play throughout it with a hard-ass Netbox CEO, and there's opportunities for the teams to compete and collaborate. We set it up and the teams imply competition. Halfway through the simulation, we may reveal you guys are all part of the same organization, and this year's bonuses are going to largely depend on collective performance. And there's a supporting business acumen book. So you have an initial set of objectives. So let me just change screens, and I'm going to go into the simulation itself. So it's web-based, so I'm logging in as the main facilitator. And it plays a bit of music, brings things up to speed, and not so. We're running this in a live event. I would be the master facilitator, and I'd be sharing my screen. I'd be giving everybody a demo, and whenever I finish, each of the teams log in with their own login, and they take it from there. So let's just show you what it looks like. So down at the bottom of the screen, we have a little gear symbol, and that lets you play with the screen in terms of make it easier to read. So it's quite a nice design. It says we are in Q1 of 4 quarters. On the left strip, we have our decisions. On the right strip, we have our results. And in the middle, we have our dashboard. And I'll say a bit more about those at the minute. Along the top, I have a leaderboard where I can show everybody else who's currently playing the simulation. And if I go into that at the minute, it shows who's playing it on the day, and you can see the status of everybody else in the simulation. So we regularly show the leaderboard to create a sense of healthy competition between the teams. We then have an e-document section. All documents used in the simulation are sent out electronically. And we have a little e-document screen where you get all the updates. And the facilitator can drip feed these updates, or if they're feeling lazy, they can have them automatically released. And if you look down at, you can click down the various documents, team quiz, initiative 1, etc., etc. Down the bottom left of the screen, you'll see a QR code and another link. The way this normally works over a virtual platform is one person logs in and runs a sim for everybody. They share their screen with everybody, but everybody else in the team can get the documents separately, either to their computer or their tablet or their mobile phone. Why is that important? There's a lot of work in these simulations, and if you don't divide up the labor well, you won't do well. So one of the things is, if everybody's doing everything at the same time, you're not a very effective team. So the simulation teaches a lot about a topic, which is business acumen and strategy, but also you have to form and operate an effective team. And with various little tools within the simulation as well. We are what we call a learning by discovery play. Socrates, the famous philosopher, says, I can't teach anybody anything. I can only make them think. We don't try to teach people. We just try to make them think, to discover what they need to know. So the tools bit is really powerful for discovery. A couple of great papers on strategic thinking models, useful models for teams, sales profitability planning, and a couple of little risk tools we throw in as well there. So the whole idea is the team of 5 or 6 really take a team-based approach to playing the simulation. So we're at the start of round 1. Basically, our decisions, the first decision is, what is our price? It's currently set to 6. And if we put it, each time we increment it, it increases by 10%. We can put it up or down. If we put it high, demand will go down. If we put it down, demand will go up. But there is a paradox. We put it too high, we lose business. We put it too low, we leave money on the table. So, but our price doesn't matter in isolation. Our price is relative to what the competitors are doing. So it says the market price is 6 and our price is 6 at the minute. So there's a concept called price differential. If I put it to 7, I have a price differential of 1. And this is a premium organization, so it should have a price differential. And during the simulation, the market price moves, and teams have to guess when the market price is going to move based on the briefing materials. Second decision is product mix. We have 3 products: real-time movies, real-time sport, and live events, which is music, real-time music. It's an Irish system of adjustment here. Very simple. It's a fixed budget for marketing. If you put one up, you got to put one down. So for example, at some point in the sim, it describes bad weather, which results in sporting events being cancelled. So in that case, there wouldn't be much point marketing those sports events. So that would be a good decision. It then gets a little bit more tricky. We have operational priorities, which are short-term things, and organizational priorities, which are long-term things. And what we do to make it challenging for you is we say you can set 3 of these to a high priority, but it's any 3 from 8. It goes across the short term and the long term. So for example, you could set sales and marketing as a high priority and supply chain as a high priority. If you try to do more than that, you will be penalized. So in terms of the short-term priorities, this is a business to consumer scenario. So you have a customer loyalty ladder, and these short-term decisions move customers up and down the loyalty ladder. Organizational priorities are more longer term, and they manage the status of all these traffic lights, which is really organizational health. They're all green at the minute, but if you start to let them drop into the amber and red, you'll get what we call organization drag. So there's lots of dilemmas here. For example, people who are very operationally focused probably want to do something like this, which would protect the top line, but would destroy the organizational health of the business. They're really gaming the business. They're going to burn the business out. Whereas you've got people, maybe people in HR positions or people who are more strategic, they might think, well, I'm going to put all my effort in here. And what they'll do is they'll have a very healthy organization, but they'll miss all their targets and the team won't be in a job anymore. So there's quite a few dilemmas here that teams have to face. So I'm going to put in a few simple set of decisions just to get the ball rolling. So what I've done is I've put my price up. I'm going to keep my product mix equal for now. I'm focusing on sales and marketing, and I'm focusing on IT. Each round I also I can do a management project. And in round 1, it's normally a strategic project, but I won't digress into that at the minute. So typically a round here takes 45 minutes because you're getting drip fed all this information. When a team's argued enough and happy about their decisions, they hit the submit button. And they can instantly see their results. So we've got a customer satisfaction indicator, which has gone into the red. So that wasn't great decisions I made there. Market share's looking good. I've got a mini P&L, which says in the quarter, I did 16.35 million in sales, and I did 5.8 million in profits. So reasonable financial performance. Organizational results, then I have 2 organizational gauges. Organizational health is an internal gauge of how the organization is doing. And organizational vitality is how dynamic and vital and up to date the market think your organization is. And then in the middle, we then see the various indicators. We see that the market price did in fact go up. So I judged that quite well. It says also, I've got some issues in my IT network and people, so I've got a little bit of organizational drag. So I have issues to address there, and it's telling me how the loyalty ladder's gone. I'm moving some regulars up to loyals, so that's going quite well. And you see also I've now got a whole clatter of documents for the next round, which is round 2. So normally what we do at this point is we give the teams time to study the results. We then bring them back into plenary, and they share some of their learnings with the other teams. Then we show the leaderboard, and this shows how everybody's doing. So this is a 6-hour sim, business strategy, business acumen, putting a team under pressure, dealing with crises. It's also used for finance for non-financial people, because it's very good at giving people a basic understanding of a profit and loss and the different factors that impact it. So that's a quick introduction to the XSIM business simulation. Again, Kareem, I'm happy to take any questions at this point, or just keep motoring on.
Ken, can you just emphasize again who would want to use this? Who this would be most useful for?
These simulations are a manager level. So generally the target audience is 1st and 2nd level managers, and also emerging talent, people who've been earmarked for talent, for greater things and becoming managers. Most of our clients, we've different categories of clients, global organizations running leadership development programs. We also have a number of business schools who take and white label the simulations. So it's classic management development and leadership development.
And I should clarify that Ken's been doing this for quite a while, so has quite a bit of experience. Ken, we have 2 questions. The first question is this made with Stella Architect, or is there custom software being used?
The great question. The core modeling is all done in Stella Architect. Then we use Stella Simulator and a custom user interface and a custom database and a custom backbone to make it look nice over the web. So every 100% the modeling is classic and pure Stella Architect.
Thank you, Ken. And during this particular simulation, how much competitor information, such as changing prices, is shared?
That's another good question. Basically, there's constant market intelligence coming out in this document section. We have all these news updates. For example, news update, Newspack Q1, first Newspack is giving information on, it's pretty modern. The world's recovering from a pandemic. Businesses have been impacted. There's a competitor pushing their prices up by 5%. There's bad weather. So what we do is teams have to read the market information and interpret it, and we try to make it quite challenging for them to do this. We don't absolutely spell it out. So one of the key skills in the simulation is interpreting the information about the market, if that makes any sense.
Yes, thank you. And those are all the questions for now.
Okay, well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to now go into the second simulation, which is a totally different simulation. It is a high-performing team simulation called Chapter. So let me just load up Chapter. So Chapter is, the challenge is totally different here. Chapter, you're the newly appointed leader of a high-performing team, and you've got 9 weeks to get them in shape. And if we, each individual in the team has a page. So Alberto has a dashboard which says how you can intervene with Alberto. He's a public profile which tells you information mostly about how influential Alberto is. And Alberto has a private profile, which this may not come out over the webinar. It's a
First of all,
It's a little
Our
talking
regular
avatar.
team meetings do not usually have anything.
So the first part of the simulation is the planning piece, where you have to read the information on all the individuals, listen to their profiles. And if I look at the context, then you are Nick, either you're playing this as an individual or a team. You are playing the role of Nick, and you've this team, and you have to get them in shape over the next 9 weeks. And you've really got 2 challenges. We have a little high-performing team model. This is what we call integrated high-performing teams. And the question I always ask people is, building a high-performing team a change management project or a process development project? And the answer is yes. It's both of those things, but often we forget and only do one of those things. So in terms of change management, on the right, you've got to deal with every individual. They're all at different places. You've got to get insight into them, build relationship, understand and influence them, and then you've got to get their commitment, and you've got to support them, and you've got to use best practices in change management. And one of the key best practices is work with the most influential people on the team first, and they will bring everybody else along with you. So one of the initial exercises is doing what we call a stakeholder mapping, where you work out the most influential people on your team and you plan around them. And if you remember, I talked about dilemmas. The dilemma in this sim is there's 10 people, and each week you're only allowed to intervene with 4 of them. So you have an instant scarcity. So you've got to do the change management side, but also you've got to do the team improvement side. You've got to fix the team's meetings, fix the team's communications, make sure the alignment and accountability is right. And for example, so some people just do the process side of high-performing teams, but that often ends up with a set of processes nobody uses. Other people do the change management side of high-performing teams. They get everybody in a really good place, but they still have terrible team meetings, and that undoes all the change management. So there's a planning piece, and we have a little tool here, which is 2 little tools: process health check, how healthy is your team's processes, and a stakeholder analysis tool. Once you've done that piece, we go back to the different individuals and we decide how are we going to intervene with them. So example, Alberto, we have a poor relationship with Alberto. It's red. Maybe it's just non-existent. And Alberto is not a supporter of the idea of a high-performing team. His adoption level is red. So we have to be careful if we're meeting with Alberto. So some of the interventions are very safe. Meet with a team member informally. That would be a good one to do with Alberto. There's other things where you seek team members' views about how well a team is working. Now, there's one of these interventions here that would be a dreadful one to do with Alberto at the minute. And it's this one here: ask a team member to play a supporting team leadership role. You barely know Alberto. Alberto doesn't like the idea of being in your high-performing team, and you're asking him to play a supporting team leadership role. Alberto will just show you the door. So basically what you do is you try to pick the right interventions for the right person, and they're all at different points. And you're only allowed 4, and it'll stop me if I try to do more than 4. So I've got my 4 team interventions. I now need to look at the team processes. How do I find out what's wrong with the processes? If I go to everybody's private profile, they will speak to me the weaknesses and strengths of the processes. So there's quite a lot of listening here. We can also have any of these team members can be played by a facilitator, which makes it very 3-dimensional. So I go in and I fix a couple of processes. I'm doing these pretty much at random. Then I go to my submit button, confirming my submit. It takes me to my results page. Then basically on the left-hand side, we're trying to get everybody to head towards green. We're trying to get the aspects of the processes to head towards green as well. You can see the little upside down triangles which show I have improved things a little bit. For example, I intervened in the meetings area. And if I break that down, I say, well, the real weakness in my meetings is my virtual phone meeting practices. They're pretty much abominable. I need to work on those. Then we see the different team members, and as you go through the sim, people should be starting to turn green. So the objective is to get as many as possible of the team members to be green by the end of the simulation. It's a challenging sim. This takes also about 4 hours. XSIM's about a 6-hour sim. Teams will do pretty well if they get 6 to 8 people. There's also a difficulty level we can put to make it a little bit easier or a little bit harder. So that's a very quick overview of chapter. Now, one of the interesting things about chapter is I talked about solo, where some of our clients, they don't want a facilitated simulation. Everybody's playing at the same time. They want a group of 30 people to play a sim under their own steam, say over a 6 or 8 week period. They don't want a facilitator. So solo is a solution for that. And chapter is also available over solo. When you look at the research into how do you make self-directed stuff work, there's a couple of things you need to do. First of all, we have a little electronic facilitator built in, which nags you and tells you things you're missing. We then have what we call the solo guide. And the solo guide takes you step by step through what you do next. For example, we've done basic setup and familiarization. We've done our preparatory research. We now get instructions for running the first 3 weeks. And as we complete a task, we then get the opportunity to say it's complete. And we can't move on to the next task until all the previous tasks are complete. So you get very specific tasks that you need to do, and this guides you step by step through them. You have to watch videos at various points. So in a good solo learning, you need a electronic facilitator. You need a guide to tell you what to do next. And the third vital ingredient comes out in all the research. You need a journal. You need to be able to journal your answers. So solo's got a built-in journaling system where you can go down and you can answer various questions and record. So it's all stored over the web. So this is solo. So any sim, our sims can basically be played in what I call short, fat sessions with a facilitator, or some of the sims can be played in solo mode, which is long and thin sessions. Without a facilitator, you have instead what we call a course director, but that's mostly an admin role. So this is the 2 different ways you can play the simulations. So that's a quick demo of chapter and an introduction to the solo concept. Kareem, anything else coming up on the chat at this point?
Yeah, there are a number of questions, but I also have a question you might want to clarify. You talked about solo, but solo still, it's a group of people working on it. It's not just for one person, correct?
Solo, there's a cohort in solo, but solo can be they can be playing individually. So you can play chapter as a team, or you can play chapter as an individual. So if you're playing chapter solo, if there's 30 people, they're probably playing as 30 individuals. They're not connecting with each other.
Yeah, that's not quite what I meant though. I meant as far as I'm a company who wants to use solo, can I buy one copy for one person? It's usually for a group, correct?
Absolutely. We have a minimum, I think, of 30 people in a solo cohort. We don't have the capacity to provide the level of support at the minute to be able to offer single simulations for individuals.
Great, thank you. A number of questions. The first one, actually the first 2 are very related. How complex is the underlying model? For example, how many parameters are there in it? Or someone said they just want to take a quick look at the model to see how complex it might look. So they're similar questions.
The models for these, each of these projects started off as a custom project for a client, and then it was very popular and we generalized it. So the models, it depends what you mean by complex. I'm very happy to actually show a model, you know, and let people have a look at the stocks and flows side of things. They are moderately complex, but I wouldn't say they're exceptionally complex. So I don't know, Karim, if you like, I'm very happy to open up a model and let people have a quick look at it, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I think a quick look would be fine. You know, just to show them the size of it, maybe.
Okay, well let me do that. You know, so I'm opening up Stella Architect now.
And while you're doing that, another question was, how do you calibrate your model if that's applicable? I'd say it probably isn't applicable, but then the question would be, how do you parameterize your model?
That's a really good question. So we design these models with subject matter experts. We are not the subject matter experts in the topic. So the first piece of calibration is really working with the subject matter experts to see, does it pass their sanity check in terms of normal kind of decisions and abnormal kind of decisions. So we calibrate it really through subject expert review. And then the problem with subject experts is they are experts. So when you build a model with subject experts, it may actually be too difficult for the target participant to play. So the second piece of calibration is what we call a landing test, where we get a number of people who are in the target demographic but have not been exposed to any of the design thinking around the model, and then we play it through with them. Within our architecture, we have the facility to store all decisions and all results. So we can, after we play the models, we look to see, were there any unexpected results? Was it too difficult or too easy? And we then can change the model and replay the same set of decisions until we are comfortable. So really, we are trying to avoid people getting insane answers for common decisions. And we're trying to make sure the difficulty levels are right. So we're not necessarily trying to provide realism, because one of the things you have to do in learning, and you see it on the adverts for the video games, you have to shorten the sequences, you have to exaggerate effects to get the right engagement in a short time period.
Thank you, Ken. So you're actually calibrating to people's experiences.
Yes, that's generally how we do it. We're probably an atypical user of Stella in the sense that we're developing L&D tools for management development, which is probably slightly in the niche space. So if I just pick a model, I think XSIM, and I'm going to look at the latest version of XSIM. So here we're in at the, I love working at the model level, you know. So what you've got here, so this is the this bit here, all the stocks. These stocks are all holding different types of customers: potential customers, new customers, regulars, former customers, and loyals. So down here, we're seeing that aspect of the. So that's one aspect of the model there. That's probably what you would call the main chain. We have logic around customer growth. And then if I start to scroll on down a bit here, we have repeat sales. So we are tracking. So this is really the financials piece of the model. The first piece was really looking at the number of customers you have, and this is the financial impact of those customers. If we scroll on down, We have a section on pricing, a section on not allowing you to make more than your maximum decisions. We have a section on product mix. So I guess it's horses for courses, Kareem. You would probably think this was a very simple model. So so it's probably on there's probably 3 by 3 pages worth of model. So I don't know how that would rate overall on the complexity scale.
Great, thank you. And someone asked, do you have a single universal model for all clients, or do you customize depending upon the way the client wants to work?
That's a really good question. Yes, what we do is we expose a number of things at the user interface level. So let me just have a quick look at that. We expose a number of things at the user interface level, and then we then allow our user interface to send different parameters. So there's various switches, program pins on, SIM updates on, special projects on. All of these can be set at a client level. The clients can configure all these topics. And also we allow the clients, if they want, they can also brand the user interface. They can have a custom homepage. So we're trying to make it that it's one Stella model per SIM with a number of exposed parameters that are then sent to us by the user interface that allow the SIMs to, one set of code supports numerous instances of the same SIM, all potentially configured differently.
Thank you, Ken. And related to the last question, could you tell us some of the assumptions behind this particular model, the XSIM model, just very quickly?
XSIM model, what the key assumptions are, first a set of assumptions is it's business to consumer. So customer loyalty is at the heart of it. So you will have a customer loyalty ladder, and customer loyalty ladders are typically skewed in that the most loyal customers, you have the least amount of those. And then regulars of the next level. Some organizations also have what they call occasionals, then you have new business. So this simulation actually started off as a simulation for a tea company, a world-renowned tea company, and they had 3 different types of products: green teas, black teas, and infusions. So a lot of the core ratios we took out of best practice in those kind of organizations. So there's starting positions for businesses. There is a lot of assumptions there where the business is, but pretty much it's quite open. It's quite box after that, because one of the things we want people to understand is the causal nature of things. For example, if you invest in sales, it will have a precise impact in this way on your customer loyalty ladder. So we try to avoid too many assumptions in the models, but we do have basic parameters that we've taken from industry best practice.
Thanks, Ken. That brings up another question. It's not a question they brought up, but you reminded me of something when you're talking about this. This was originally developed for a tea company, but it was still this video market, right? It was completely different business model, or not a business model, but a different market that they were looking at for this.
It was totally different. It was tea, and it was instead of running for quarters, you were running for years. So the tea company, we did it for them first, and then we thought, hey, this is a great sim, but it's very limited doing tea. So with their agreement, we rewrote it and we generalized it to make it appropriate for a totally different kind of market, which had much wider applicability.
Okay, but it's always netbox, right? No matter what my business is, you don't you keep it netbox, right? You work in a separate market than they're used to.
Absolutely. This one here, this one here is netbox, and whenever you run it, you will always be running netbox. Now you might run it at different difficulty levels, and you might run it at different options. For example, you might decide to have no crises happening. So this one, the parameterization is at quite a high level. But the other one, you could actually rename all the people and have the difficult person could be this person rather than that person. So some of the sims like this one, it's relatively minor, what we call it configuration, whereas the other sims actually can be considerably customized. It really depends on the sim and the client.
And does the client find more helpful that it's in a different market area than their own? Does that help them transfer the knowledge easier?
It does. It helps them. Often when you build a simulation when we build a simulation, even if we build a custom simulation for a client, we'd quite often make it an organization like theirs rather than theirs, because if people are working in their own organization, they make certain assumptions and they are constrained, and they're actually unwilling to try high risk things. So we started off building totally custom sims every time, but once I built a simulation for a global car manufacturer, and I worked with the deputy global finance director, and the first time I ran it, people said that's not the way it works here. And that's the problem with a custom simulation. People are using their own knowledge too much. So we like to take them into a new area where they have to start from scratch, all on a level playing field. And our experience is the learning's better and they are more relaxed.
Thanks, Ken. How challenging is it to apply simulation results to real life?
Well, in the simulations, we will close them all. The real reason they're doing the simulations is to take things away for real life. So at the end of a simulation, one of the most important points is the debrief at the end. And typically the X simulation, you will have 10 key learning points around running a business to consumer business. Many of those will apply to any type of business. You will then have a number of learning points about how to form and operate a team from scratch. So these simulations are all run for the learning that happens afterwards. And that's the key thing people are. And I've had people say to me, I've got a year's experience in a day on a simulation, because one of the things we try to do is it's not just a simulation. We'll have people in doing role plays as well, playing the role of the managing director, and people will learn from their colleagues. So the key thing is it's a multi-dimensional experience. Looking at the sim, working with the facilitator, doing role plays, debating things with your colleagues, and then getting feedback from the overall facilitator at the end. And if in a 6-hour sim, people are actually only looking at the screen for probably an hour and a half. The rest of the time, we've got them away from the screen doing exercises, debating, planning, and strategizing, because that's where we think the best learning happens.
Thanks, Ken. So that segues kind of to your last slides. We only have a few minutes. I don't know if you can do them in just a few minutes, but yeah, there's some questions left over too.
Well, I'll go really quick on these and then leave some time for questions. So a couple of things when you're doing simulation and you want to make it a success. First of all, understand the neuroscience and psychology. It has to be fun, but it has to be serious fun. There needs to be some consequences. So quite often we get the most senior person we can find in the organization to introduce it and come back and to hear the team's final presentations. So there needs to be some level of stress. No stress isn't any good. Extreme stress, people don't learn under extreme stress. So happy to send these slides afterwards. Understanding the psychology of learning. There's multiple dimensions of learning as well. And there's 9 different dimensions here that you need to plan an event around. And that it makes an event so much more rich if you've multiple dimensions of learning happening, not just people sitting in front of the screen. We have a process for discovery-based learning. If you just let people play a sim, they'll high five at the end, they'll pat each other in the back, they'll say that was great, but they probably didn't learn anything. So we have a very structured process, and it's all about building in the time for reflection and experimentation. And this is a slide I like. How do you get participants in the right frame of mind for a simulation? Trick is have them treated exactly like the real world. Real world mindset. You don't get to pick your team members. You have to meet imposed deadlines, which you little say in. You don't get all the information. The information you do have is wrong. When things go wrong, you're accountable. You can't blame the system, the higher up, or the jerks. Nobody has the answers. There's nobody you can ask. You must keep reviewing your results and find ways to improve. And as Nike said, you just have to do it. The only upside is, unlike life, you get a demo and some briefing papers, a team you can rely on, time to prepare yourself, the opportunity to ask questions before you start, and regular pauses in the simulation to study your results and work out how to do better. If only life was like that. So I guess that's all I've got in terms of my presentation. Very happy to take any other questions.
The next question is, does the client need to know Stella or system dynamics modeling? And what is the profile of people who you customize for?
Absolutely not. They don't, they wouldn't, unless they wanted to know, they would never know anything about, there's no requirement to know anything about Stella or system dynamics. When we're customizing for a client, it's usually because they want to put 500 plus people through a simulation, and they're probably putting them through in batches of 25. If they only want to run a simulation once, we would say, don't be silly. You can't afford to customize. You can't afford to do major surgery on it. But last year we wrote a brand new life sciences sim that we call YSIM, and it was for a real life sciences European client. And then we generalized that. So building a custom sim is a massive job. It's a 6-month exercise, and most clients don't, and they have to make major input. So run it off the shelf. You can configure it quite easily without customization, but if you want to actually customize, then you'd need to have probably a large amount of people you're going to put through it to justify it. But if you customize it, you get a sim that totally reflects your business.
Thanks, Ken. There's a question about the possibility to partner or license the sims for workshops with clients, or do you only sell directly to clients? And I'll just add that he has partnered with IC Systems, so we do offer this as well directly on our website. But go ahead, answer.
Yes, so yes, you can get all our sims on the IC Systems website as an end user. But we also would partner. We have a number of major business schools and consultancies who we partner with. And for those kind of people, we will also white label the sim. So our sims can be in your branding, and we'll train your facilitators up to run the sims. So again, if you're interested in those, just come in through the IC Systems connection, and we're happy to. So it doesn't have to be end users. If you're in consulting in any shape or form, and you think these sims might be relevant to your clients, then we can work with you as well.
Thank you, Ken. The last question I have today is, how difficult is it to integrate with existing databases, for example, using SAP data?
The honest answer is I've never done it. So we generally don't use live data because live data doesn't illustrate all the learning points. So usually we scrub data. So we come up with quite often for a major car manufacturer, for example, we took live data that was 2 or 3 years old, and then we scrubbed it and we put it in, and it didn't fully cover all the exceptions. So I don't think it's that difficult because we don't need vast volumes of data because we're really turning the data into business rules. So I think there'd be initial exercise in looking through the data but we've never worked with live data. We haven't found a use case for it, but it would be something we'd be very interested in looking at.
Thank you, Ken. There are no more questions. That's the end of our webinar. Thank you for joining us today. I don't know, Ken, if you want to say some words before we go.
No, it's been great, and I hope this hasn't been too much of a race for you. I'm very delighted to sit down. Kareem and I will be very happy to give detailed demos of any of the products. In 1 hour, we can do a very detailed demo of any of these products with your team, and actually you get a feel for what it's like to run them. And they're totally web-based, so very happy to have follow-up conversations on any of the simulations. Thanks, Kareem.
Thanks, Ken. And goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.